The night started with champagne and polished lies. I was already halfway through a glass of something French and overpriced, my tie a little too tight around the neck and my patience thinner than the smiles in that room. The party was being held in one of those glass-encased penthouses that make you feel poor even when you're holding a company card. I wasn't in the mood, but I showed up. Because appearances matter when you've worked your way up in a place where handshakes mean less than whispers and everyone's pretending not to smell the rot behind the marble. She showed up 42 minutes late. I watched her step out of the elevator like she owned the building, hair freshly done, makeup calculated, lips the color of violence. She didn't look around for me. She went straight to the circle of execs, laughing like she belonged there, laughing like she wasn't supposed to be standing next to me. People noticed. One of the interns gave me a side glance that said what nobody else dared. I didn't blink. I took another sip and waited. I remember every second. The taste of metal in my mouth. The synthetic sweetness of the perfume she wore that she said I'd bought her but I never did. The flicker in her eye when she locked eyes with my boss. The way he grinned back like they were finishing a joke I wasn't in on. And then it happened. My boss, Greg, that smug, sweaty man with too much money and not enough decency, raised his glass with a kind of smirk you only see in movies where someone's about to get executed with words. His voice cut through the music like a scalpel. "This weekend," he said, pausing like he was savoring it, "I'll be with your wife. You'll keep your job and even get a bonus." There was a moment where the room hesitated. The laughter didn't come instantly. People weren't sure if they'd heard it right. And I stood there, in the center of that hesitation, trying to process whether I was being publicly humiliated, or whether I just hallucinated it all. But then she turned to me, not shocked, not offended. She smiled, and I swear, everything in me froze over when she said, casually, smoothly, like this had been rehearsed, "I'm in." And that's when everything cracked. No, not just cracked. That's when reality broke like a wine glass under a steel boot. I didn't say a word. Couldn't. Because my entire body was processing betrayal at a cellular level. She didn't look away. She didn't flinch. She owned that moment. Like this was a deal she'd been negotiating behind my back for months. People started looking around. Some laughed nervously. Others looked away. One of the partners clinked his glass and pretended to be amused, like this was just Greg being Greg. But I saw the look on his assistant's face. The discomfort. The recognition. Because whatever this was, it wasn't a joke. Not to me. I stepped forward. Just once. Not enough to cause a scene, but enough for her to raise a brow. She knew I wouldn't blow up. Not there. Not yet. She knew I had too much to lose. And that's when it hit me. That was the point. That was the entire power play. Greg didn't need to seduce her. He bought her loyalty the way he buys silence, transactional, surgical. And she sold it, clean and without hesitation. She turned back to her circle of execs and laughed at something Greg whispered. Like the moment didn't just detonate everything we'd built. Like I was just a piece on the board she'd sacrificed for a better position. I walked out. I didn't even remember grabbing my coat. I didn't say goodbye. I walked down 30 floors because I didn't want to be trapped in an elevator with the kind of silence that makes you scream. But I didn't scream. Not yet. I went home. And when I opened the front door, her second phone was charging on the kitchen counter, blinking with notifications she hadn't bothered to hide anymore. That's when I knew. This wasn't her slipping up. This wasn't a mistake. This was strategy. And it had just begun. I didn't sleep that night. Not even close. I sat in the kitchen, in the dark, listening to the ticking of the stupid minimalist wall clock she insisted we buy for vibe. I just stared at that second phone glowing like a siren on the counter. Notifications coming in one after another, mostly from someone saved as just G. One of the messages popped up right in front of me. Confirmed for Sunday. Tell him anything you want. I didn't touch it. I didn't need to. I already knew. The whole night had been confirmation. I didn't need more evidence. What I needed was answers she'd never give. The front door opened at 2:17 a.m. I didn't move. I wanted to see what she'd do when she didn't know I was watching. She came in humming. She dropped her keys, slipped off her heels, and went straight to the fridge like she didn't just light a match and toss it into the heart of our lives. Opened a bottle of sparkling water. Drank it straight from the bottle. Then she noticed me. There was no jump, no gasp, no guilty twitch. Just a slow turn of her head and a raised eyebrow. She looked at me like I was the one who needed to explain myself. "You're up," she said, like I was just some roommate keeping odd hours. I didn't say anything. I just stared. She leaned against the counter, swirled what was left of the water in the bottle like it was wine. "If this is about the party, don't go all fragile on me." It was a joke. I laughed. It wasn't a real laugh. Came out raw like bark from a wound. That's what that was? A joke? She rolled her eyes like I was a toddler throwing a tantrum. "Jesus, relax. Greg was drunk. He says dumb stuff all the time." I stood up. "He said he'd be with you this weekend. You smiled and said you're in." And her tone didn't change. It was flat, controlled. "Do you think I'm going to let your little meltdown screw up your job? Grow up. That's how these men talk. It's disgusting, yes, but if you act offended, you lose power. You think I actually meant it?" I looked at her for a long moment. Then I asked, "Did you?" She didn't answer. She walked past me like the question was beneath her and headed for the bedroom. I followed. "Don't," she said before I even stepped in. "Don't turn this into something it's not." I stared at the door she closed behind her like it was the end of a book that made no sense. The silence on the other side of it felt calculated. So I went back to the kitchen, sat down, stared at the phone again. I didn't want to touch it. I wanted her to know I could but hadn't. I wanted her to feel watched even when I wasn't looking. The next morning, she acted like nothing happened. She made a smoothie, asked if I wanted coffee. She wore a hoodie that wasn't mine. And that told me everything I needed to know. I didn't answer. I didn't eat. I didn't speak. But I started writing everything down. Times, places, names, the new accounts she didn't think I knew about, the transactions, the hotels she never mentioned, the receipts that didn't add up. I wasn't planning to confront her again. Not yet. She'd played her hand in public. Now it was my turn. And I don't bluff. 2 days later, I followed her. She said she was going to see her sister. That's her usual excuse when she doesn't feel like being creative. I played along, kissed her on the cheek, told her to drive safe, even held the door for her like we were still something real. Then I waited 10 minutes, grabbed my keys, and left. I didn't tail her like a rookie. I know how she thinks, always checking mirrors, always assuming people aren't as smart as she is. So I kept my distance. I already had the address. Found it a week ago on a statement she'd accidentally left in the shred pile. One of those boutique hotels on the edge of downtown. The kind with intimate lounges, and staff that won't ask questions if you tip well enough. Her car was there, parked in the back under a camera. That made me laugh. She always underestimates the details. I didn't go inside. I didn't need to. A man doesn't need to see everything to understand it. I waited in my car, engine off, for nearly 2 hours. I watched couples go in and out, watched the valet hand keys over like sins passed between strangers. And then I saw him, Greg. Wearing a baseball cap like that would somehow erase who he was. Like he hadn't announced his affair with my wife over champagne in front of half my department. He didn't see me. I didn't let him. He walked in through the side entrance. Confident. Entitled. I left before they did. I wasn't interested in catching them together. Not yet. That wasn't the move. Because this isn't just about betrayal anymore. This is about leverage. And leverage isn't loud. It's built in silence. That night I took the day off work. Told them I wasn't feeling well. The irony nearly choked me. I spent the entire day digging. Not just into her life but into Greg's. Public records, financials, corporate filings, people he didn't think were watching. I used every tool she didn't know I had. And what I found cracked something deeper than anger. Greg wasn't just seeing her. He'd done this before. There was a pattern. Non-disclosures. Settlements. Quiet removals from projects followed by medical leaves that didn't match the timing. And most importantly, 3 women whose names showed up briefly in HR complaints that were resolved without explanation. Brittany wasn't special. She was just next. And she didn't even know it. That night, when she came home, I was at the table, reading one of the internal memos Greg had sent to legal. The kind of thing you only get if someone inside owes you a favor. She dropped her bag by the door and gave me that same rehearsed smile she's been using all week. "You feeling better?" she asked. I looked up, slowly, made sure my face told her nothing. "A lot better," I said. And for the first time in weeks I saw it. That flicker. Not guilt. Not regret. Doubt. Because she's good at games. But she's never played one where the other person already knows the ending. And this game, it just changed. The silence between us started to evolve. It used to be dead space, awkward and sharp. Now it was something alive, circling her like a predator, waiting. I didn't have to press anymore. She was starting to feel it. That slow paranoia when you know someone's watching but you don't know what they've seen. She was quieter in the mornings, less combative, testing me with her eyes when she thought I wasn't looking. But I was always looking. I let her think I was recovering, that I was letting things go. I started making breakfast again. I asked her about her day, let her ramble about work drama and her fitness accountability group, that I now knew was just a locked group chat with Greg and 2 of his lawyers. I let her feel like control was returning to her hands. She didn't realize I was just letting the rope play out. Meanwhile, I planted seeds. I scheduled a private lunch with one of the firm's junior partners, Miles. Young guy, too smart for his position, trying to climb without stepping on the wrong feet. I told him just enough. Not the affair. Not the hotel. Just concerns. A whisper about favoritism. About how Greg was making decisions that didn't reflect internal performance reviews. I knew Miles would dig. That's what ambitious people do. They sniff weakness, then package it as loyalty to the board. Back home, I staged the next layer. She left her laptop open one evening, password still cached. A mistake. I made sure she knew it was one. I moved one of her tabs, barely. Just enough that it would be obvious if you were paranoid. And she was. She brought it up that night. Casually, "Hey, did you use my laptop?" I didn't even look up from my book. "Nope." She stared at me. I could feel her trying to read between my words, looking for the trap. I gave her nothing, and that nothing was louder than anything I could have said. The next morning, I left a file on the counter. A manila envelope. Blank. Nothing inside. Just there. Waiting. I timed it so I'd be in the shower when she found it. When I got out, it was gone. She didn't mention it. I didn't ask. That night, she offered to cook. She never cooks. I said sure. Sat at the table while she moved around the kitchen like she was auditioning for forgiveness. She made pasta. Poured wine. Told me she'd been thinking about us. Said maybe we needed a trip. Time away. Just us. I asked her where she'd want to go. She said, somewhere with no reception. I didn't laugh, but I wanted to. She was scrambling. That smile she wore was too polished now. Like she was trying to sell something she wasn't even sure worked. I asked her again, where would we go? She hesitated. And I mean really hesitated. Like she didn't have an answer ready and that terrified her. Eventually, she said, the lake house. We haven't been there in years. I nodded. Okay. But here's what she didn't know. Greg had just booked that same lake house for the exact weekend she mentioned. I knew because I'd called the place myself. Posed as someone interested in renting it. They told me it was already taken. Under his name. Full payment. No cancellation. And I knew she'd bring it up before long. Because her plans weren't hers. They were his. And she was on a script I'd already read. When I told her, okay, I watched her relax. Like the tension had finally found an exit. But it hadn't. It was just getting comfortable. Because what she was planning as a weekend of lies was going to become something else entirely. She spent the next week preparing for the getaway. What was fascinating to watch, almost morbidly fascinating, was how naturally she slid into the role of the loving wife. Like nothing had ever happened. Like she hadn't humiliated me in public, lied in private, and used our marriage like it was a disguise she could take off whenever she needed to feel alive again. I watched her pack carefully. Not for me. For him. I recognized the perfume bottle. The lingerie still had tags. She didn't even hesitate. That told me everything I needed to know. The night before we were set to leave, she brought home wine. She never brought home wine. Said she wanted to start relaxing early. I poured us both a glass. We sat on the couch, the TV playing something I didn't hear. She talked about how excited she was to disconnect. Get back to us. Her voice even cracked a little when she said it. She's always been good at sounding honest. I sipped my drink, smiled, said I couldn't wait either. Inside, I was already packed. But not for the lake. That morning, she left first. I told her I had a quick meeting to wrap up before joining her. She bought it, drove off in her usual rush, singing to herself. I didn't follow. I went to my lawyer's office instead. The manila envelope that had been empty, now it was full. Messages, photos, timestamps. A full chain of proof. Greg's name on hotel receipts, her phone logs, even screenshots from the internal HR system showing mismatched meeting records. My lawyer didn't blink. Said he'd seen worse. But he did raise an eyebrow when he saw the signature on one of the NDAs Greg had used in a past case. Same signature, different woman. That gave us more than just a divorce angle. That gave us leverage. See, the lake house wasn't just a place where people cheat. It was technically owned by a shell company Greg's firm used for client retreats. I had the paperwork. And in that paperwork was a clause about unauthorized personal use, especially involving employees. I wasn't going to show up at the lake house to catch them. I had someone else do it. Private investigator. A former cop. Clean record. I sent him up there under the guise of a concerned husband. Told him not to confront, just document. He arrived with a drone and a camera. Parked at a neighbor's with a clear view of the cabin. At 7:42 p.m., he sent me the first photo. Greg, shirtless, sitting on the porch with a drink in one hand and my wife's head in his lap. Laughing. 7:57. Them kissing. Wine bottles everywhere. A table set for two. Her dress was one she claimed she accidentally donated 2 months ago. Another lie carefully placed. 8:13. A text from her. Miss you already. Can't wait to see your face when you get here. I didn't reply. I forwarded it to her mother instead. The next morning, I filed the initial paperwork. Divorce. Full petition. No fault on paper, but the accompanying evidence would ensure fault off the record. I included a copy to HR at Greg's firm. Anonymous sender. Clean package. Just enough to raise internal alarms without giving away the full hand. Then I sent one final message to her. It said, "You packed for a weekend. I packed for war." And I left it at that. I didn't hear from her that day. She called me 12 times in 3 hours. I didn't answer any of them. I watched each call come in from the quiet of a hotel room I'd booked 2 cities over. Clean space, no memories, no photos on the walls. I sat in the corner chair like a man who had finally vacated the performance of his own life. The room smelled like bleach and anonymity. It was perfect. Her first voicemail was sweet, almost painfully so. That fake softness she uses when she wants to defuse a situation before it erupts. She said she was worried because I hadn't arrived yet. She asked if everything was okay. She missed me. She said my name 3 times in less than a minute, like that would pull me back. The second voicemail was different. No sweetness this time. Just, "Where the hell are you?" She sounded more annoyed than scared. She had just started to realize I was off script. That's when the messages turned into a flood. Texts, missed calls, voice memos. The shift was rapid. Sweet, cold, angry, then finally anxious. But I waited. I knew where she was, who she was with, and more importantly, who else now knew. The firm's board met that same morning. I got the confirmation from Miles via an encrypted email. The HR team had already flagged Greg's access. My anonymous packet wasn't the first, apparently, just the one that finally tipped the scales. The investigation was now official, internal, confidential, and deadly. By noon, Greg's calendar had been wiped clean. At 2:34 p.m., I got the text that ended the silence between us. Her, "You need to come here right now. Something's happening. I don't know what you did, but Greg's freaking out." I didn't respond. 5 minutes later, "You're not answering me because you think you're winning. You think this changes anything? You think this makes you smarter? You're pathetic." I could almost hear her teeth grinding through the screen. Then the voice memo came in. Almost a whisper this time, like she was trying not to let someone else hear. "You planned this. You've been planning it. Since the party." Correct. What she didn't know was that Greg had already started to turn. Men like him, when cornered, they always look for the exit. And if you give them a hand to grab, they'll take it, loyalty be damned. So I gave him a hand. Quietly. Through a third party. I let him believe she was the liability. She was. And Greg? Greg was just a burning bridge I was happy to let collapse behind me. The last message she sent was simple. Just one word. Why? I almost answered. I almost wrote the truth. That it wasn't about revenge anymore. It wasn't about the affair, the lies, the smug way she smiled at me like I was a minor inconvenience to be managed. It was about removing the infection without letting it rot me from the inside. Instead, I turned off the phone. Outside, the sky was darkening. Inside, everything was getting clearer. She came home before I did. I watched through the hallway camera feed I'd installed months ago. Long before the party, back when the silences first started to grow teeth. She walked in like a storm in heels, slammed the front door so hard the mirror in the entryway shook. Hair a mess, phone pressed to her ear, furious, pacing, cursing. Not my name, his, Greg, over and over. That was new. That was good. I watched her throw her phone onto the couch, scream into the empty room, then disappear into the bedroom. 10 minutes later, she came back out holding a suitcase. Not the one she'd packed for the lake. A bigger one. She was leaving. I didn't stop her. She didn't even notice the small black envelope taped under the coffee table. Not yet. That was fine. That was for later. By the time I walked back through that door, she was gone. Just the scent of her perfume lingering like a bad decision. I took a long breath, let the quiet settle, touched the counter, the fridge, my chair. I was retracing the home I thought we built, but now it felt like a crime scene that had been bleached too many times. I opened the coffee table, took out the envelope, and placed it where she'd find it when she inevitably came back for something. Her passport, maybe. That envelope contained only 3 things. A printed bank statement, a photo of her and Greg from the lake house, and a post-it note with 5 words. This is who you are. That's all. I wasn't going to write her a letter. She knew what she did. I wasn't going to scream or break things or send long texts begging for explanations. That's what they expect. That's what they feed on. But the one thing they can never handle is being seen. Not exposed. Seen. That night, I lit the fireplace, not for warmth. For ceremony. I burned every card she ever gave me. Every little note, every list she'd written that had my name on it. I didn't shred. I burned. Quietly. Intentionally. Watching the paper curl in silence. Like ghosts vanishing one by one. She texted me again at 3:12 a.m. Where are you? I need to talk. I didn't reply. At 3:47, another one. You don't get to walk away from this like you're clean. That one almost made me laugh. Walk away? No, this wasn't walking. This was surgery. I left the house at dawn. Not because I was running. Because I was done playing chess with someone who didn't even realize the board had flipped. I went somewhere she wouldn't look. Somewhere she'd never think I'd go. My brother's place. We hadn't spoken in a year. Long story. Family. But when he opened the door and saw me, he didn't ask anything. Just nodded. I walked in and finally slept for the first time in days. When I woke up, the real storm had started. Greg had been suspended. Internal emails were flying. Legal was circling. Brittany, or whatever mask she was wearing now, was calling everyone. She was in full panic. Not because she'd been left, but because she finally understood. She'd been played. 3 days passed before she showed up at my brother's house. She didn't knock at first. Just stood at the edge of the driveway, arms crossed, sunglasses on despite the overcast sky, like she thought that invisible armor would protect her from what she'd walked into. My brother saw her through the window and looked at me like, "You sure you want to open that door?" I did. I stepped outside without saying a word. She pulled off the glasses, and for the first time since this all began, she didn't have anything rehearsed. No smile, no venom, just that kind of desperate stillness people get when they realize the fire's not just around them. It's inside. "I need to talk to you," she said. I looked at her. Just looked. No anger. No mercy. Just a kind of stillness that unnerves people like her. She stepped closer. "You sent that file to the board." I didn't deny it. Her voice cracked. "Do you have any idea what you've done? Do you?" I said, quiet but sharp. "Or do you only react when you lose control of the script?" She laughed. It was bitter. "You think you've won? You think blowing it all up makes you some kind of hero?" I walked down the steps slowly. "No, I'm not a hero. I'm the cleanup crew after the explosion you built with your lies." She pointed a shaking hand. "Greg's not talking to me. He's cutting me off. HR is digging through my emails. My name's all over this. You earned that. She flinched like I slapped her. I didn't plan this, she said quickly. Not like you think. It just happened. He was there. You weren't. You were always working. Always distracted. There it was, the excuse she thought would matter. You chose him, I said. More than once. And don't insult both of us by pretending this was about loneliness. She tried to cry. I say tried because it was so deliberate I almost laughed. Her tears always came when she ran out of angles, when words stopped working and she needed to pull empathy out like a trick. I didn't move. You're going to destroy me, she whispered. No, I said. You already did that to yourself. I'm just making sure no one else steps in your trap. Her voice dropped low, venom seeping back in. You're not the good guy here. I tilted my head. And you're not misunderstood. Then I turned and walked back inside. Shut the door behind me. She stayed there for a while. I watched from the hallway, out of sight. She didn't knock again. She stood still for a long time, like she thought if she just waited long enough, I'd open the door again. But this time I wouldn't. And when she finally left, walking back to the car she'd used for hotel escapes and private rendezvous, she didn't look back. My brother didn't ask questions. He poured a drink, said one thing. You waited too long to cut the rope. I nodded. Not anymore. She wasn't just losing the marriage. She was starting to realize she'd never even understood the war she was fighting in. The fallout came faster than I expected. Greg was out. Not quietly, not politely, out. The firm issued a sterile statement about organizational restructuring. But everyone with half a brain knew it was a purge. The board didn't want scandal. They wanted a name to pin it to, and he gave them one, hers. Turns out, when men like Greg panic, they don't just throw people under the bus, they drag them down by the ankles. He handed over everything. Emails, messages, dates, even the internal memos she never thought he'd kept. And when the board asked him how the relationship started, he didn't say consensual. He said manipulated. It didn't matter if it was a lie. It only mattered that he got to say it first. By the end of the week, she was suspended from her position at the design firm she'd bragged about for years. The partners were reassessing internal alignment. Translation, you're a liability now. She called again. Left a voicemail this time. Her voice was flat. The kind of flat you only get after the walls start closing in. Everything's collapsing. I know you hate me, but please just talk to me. You can't be this cold. But cold wasn't the right word. Cold implies I still felt something. I wasn't cold. I was done. In the background of that voicemail, I heard a door slam. I played it 3 times just to make sure. Not from her house. She wasn't there. From somewhere temporary. A hotel, maybe. Or someone else's couch. She was floating now. Unanchored. Exactly where she'd left me months ago. I was already meeting with my accountant when the next wave hit. She tried to pull money from our shared savings. Not a lot, just enough to test the waters. But I'd already secured that account. Moved what mattered. Left just enough to make her feel like she still had a chance to salvage something. The money didn't go through. 2 hours later, another voicemail. You're trying to erase me. You can't just erase me like this. I didn't answer. Instead, I sent a single email. Short, precise. Forwarded the legal terms of the divorce petition. Included a polite but firm line. I will not be speaking with you directly. All communication can be directed to my attorney. She responded within minutes. No subject line. No greeting. Just, you're enjoying this. That's who you are now. But she was wrong again. This wasn't enjoyment. This was clarity. She'd spent years building a maze of confusion, of half-truths and pretty words. And I'd wandered that maze like a fool, thinking if I just kept loving her hard enough, she'd find her way back. But now, I wasn't in the maze anymore. I was holding the blueprint. And burning it ended not with a final scream, not with a courtroom showdown, not even with one last cruel twist, just a signature. Her signature. Scanned and emailed, no message attached. No more bargaining. No more gaslighting. No more attempts to rewrite the story in real time. Just a document with her name on it, neat and small at the bottom, like she was shrinking out of existence. The divorce was finalized in 21 minutes. No contest. No appeal. Her lawyer was as cold and mechanical as a fax machine. He didn't fight over the car, didn't argue about the condo. She didn't want the furniture. She didn't even want the dog, though she'd posted pictures of him for years like she loved him more than anything else. No, she gave it all up, because she thought if she left clean, she could start fresh somewhere else. But you can't run from reputation. You can't start fresh when the people you need to believe in you already saw the unedited version. Greg had erased her from his life like she never existed. His apology tour was already in motion, complete with PR statements and taking responsibility. She wasn't invited to that performance. And me? I stayed silent. I didn't post about it. I didn't gloat. I didn't even correct the lies she was quietly feeding into side channels. Claims that I was emotionally distant, manipulative, paranoid. It didn't matter. No one believed her anymore. The tape had already played. The truth was out. And you can't put fire back into a matchstick once it's ash. 2 weeks after the papers were filed, I got one last message. It was a photo of a place we once visited. A coastal path in Oregon, all wind and gray skies. Her caption, "I wish we could go back." I stared at it for a long time, not because it hurt, but because it didn't, because I remembered that trip. I remembered walking that trail hand in hand, while she talked about dreams she already planned to exclude me from. Even back then, she was building a door she would one day lock behind her. She just didn't know I'd be the one holding the key when it finally slammed shut. I deleted the message. Then I blocked the number. There was no rage in it. No triumph. Just freedom. The quiet kind. The kind that doesn't come with fireworks or applause. The kind that feels like walking out into cold air after months of smoke. Now I live smaller, cleaner. A different apartment, fewer things. I cook for one. I sleep better. I don't look over my shoulder. I don't wait for apologies that don't exist. And if I could offer one thing to anyone still stuck in that place, the confusion, the denial, the slow erosion of self. It's this: don't wait for proof. Wait for peace. You'll know the difference. And when you do, walk. Don't run. Don't scream. Just walk. And don't look back.